Shalom, shalom. Man, in today's video, I want to talk about why the newly married man should strive to be content with simply being able to provide for his family. Let's talk about it. All praise to the Most High, Yah Shalom. Thank you for tuning in to another Righteous Spirit episode. Today I'm back at it in them trenches handling that kingdom business. You know, as a man that once was newly married, man, there are things that I wish somebody of wisdom would have told me early on. And what I'm doing today is sharing this with you, so your expectations of the life you think or feel you're supposed to be living as a newly married man is in alignment with, you know, your desire for the family. Man, there are single men out there that don't understand the level of responsibility that it takes to provide for a family. And you have men that are not financially able to provide, and then you have men out there that do not manage their own resources well prior to marriage, but have the means to provide for a family. And this is the audience that I'm talking to. Man, as a newly married man, you know, you might not have the financial reach to have a whole lot of toys and a whole lot of expensive hobbies. I'll give you an example. Man, a inexpensive hobby that I had when I was single that transitioned over to marriage very well, because I would spend maybe $10, $15 a month at most, was fishing. And that didn't interfere with my ability to provide for my family on a consistent basis. You know, starting out young in the military, lesser rank, it didn't interfere. But my hobby and interest in firearms is an expensive hobby that will interfere with your ability to provide for your family. Younger men, you know, oftentimes trying to live up to what they see older men doing, but yet they have not had that kind of skin in the game, have not had that same work ethic or time in the game, will rack up a lot of debt trying to live your best life as a man with some of these hobbies, whether it be motorcycles, whether it be boating, whether it be firearms, whether it be golfing. You know, man, as a newly married man, you should be content with the basics and the simple stuff. But it's all about what's the priority when you first get married. As a newly married man, there's going to be things that your family is going to need. As your family grows, man, you're going to need furniture for your children. You're going to need to replace furniture in your own home. You know, there's just different things across the board that you have to be prepared for, and nobody is going to on a daily basis give you the warning or give you the knowledge of you probably shouldn't spend your last bit of money on this $300 pair of shoes that you once would buy when you were single and had no responsibility. You probably shouldn't spend that money on those shoes because, man, looking at the tires on your family car, you're going to need some tires. And tires for the average vehicle can go for anywhere from $500 to $800 for the average vehicle. You know, man, when it comes to other, you know, toys and hobbies, man, as a newly married man, young in life, establishing yourself, you probably don't need to be looking at no brand new lifted truck off the lot. You probably don't need to look at that, even though you may see the older gentlemen that have this stuff because you haven't put in the same timeline, the same capacity of work. You know, you don't have no skin in the game like that financially. And this is where a lot of men get themselves in trouble. Man, you want to live your best life when it comes to these hobbies and toys, but yet you want to neglect the basic provisions of your family. And I'll tell you, even at my age, man, I would love to have, you know, a nice F-350. I live on a homestead, so I can get a lot of use out of a nice lifted F-350, a nice 3500 Ram, you know, a brand new Toyota Tundra. But the reality is, if I don't want to spend the cash reserve to go buy this stuff outright, man, I'm going to incur some debt. And there's things that I want to do and be able to provide for my family that I'm not going to get the fulfillment of doing if I focus on hobbies and toys. You know, man, I wanted to go on a deep sea fishing trip for a while. I've had that goal for, 10 years. But the day will come where, even at close to retirement in the Army, and I still got children in the home that I'm going to have to pave the way for. I got an almost 6 months old daughter that I'm going to have to pave the way for. So family is going to come before any of that. In the meantime, I'm not, willing to spend the money to go deep sea fishing, but I've had a lot of things along the way that have given me fulfillment. I've had a boat, a Chon boat, to be able to go fishing and pay cash for that. I'm able to go fishing on a consistent basis. I'm able to, at a point in my life, I'm able to have, a couple firearms, things like that, and be able to shoot and advance that hobby. But some of the bigger ones that I want, I postpone till later in my life with the priority being on my family. And I've got sons that I don't want them to rack up student loan debt. So in order to send them to trade school, man, I'm gonna have to shell out some money to get them going, because if not, they may end up being in a uniform like this. Ain't nothing wrong with it, but I want them to have better options. And me having all these toys, man, it's not worth it. So I'm trying to get the newlyweds, the new husband, the young husband, to realize, man, that TV that's 27 inches that y'all come together and watch movies on is perfectly fine. It will do just fine. You don't need to be upgrading your TV every year. You went from a 55 to a 60 to a 65. Every year, man, you got a grand spent in trying to live your best life through your man cave. Man, when you're starting off in life, man, you really don't have that luxury as a man unless you just hit the jackpot. You really don't have that luxury. Fortunate for me, man, the Army pays for health insurance, so I don't have a bill coming out of the doctor's office or anything like that. At most, we may come out of pocket for a little bit of vision, depending on if we want a specific level of care for vision. But for a young man who's newly married, you got health care, you got all these bills, your family is still gonna wanna go places, man, you can't afford to have all these expensive hobbies, and you for dang sure can't afford to rack up no debt in the process. So new husbands, man, should be content with providing the basics for their family. Be content with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You're doing good as a man if you can provide the basic necessities for your family. There's a whole slew of men that cannot, but are still focused on things of the world, worldly possession. You know, man, I've had some soldiers along in my career that their wives, you bring them into the office and they be like, man, we go to the grocery store and this is here within the last year. A household of 3 or 4 spending $200-300 in the grocery store, don't produce no food or vegetables or go on their own, and the husband's buying $200-300 shoes on a monthly basis. And the family constantly is having to stretch meals because of the husband's hobby. Man, you don't want to find yourself in that boat, because as a husband, man, that's a role of selflessness, a role of servitude. So you have to demonstrate that oftentimes by putting aside what it is you want to do when it comes to fun, entertainment, and hobbies for the sake of the family. You know, man, I would rather spend money going to a water park and everybody in my family have their morale boosted than to spend $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 on a deep sea fishing trip, and I may be the only one to get some sort of fulfillment out of it. You know, you got to think about that, because everything today on social media has led people to believe that the optics are the reality of how everybody is living. You know, man, in my store, we got this town where we have these stores where they sell ATVs and all of this stuff, and you see young people, married people, you can see they're married, and they'll go in there and finance this stuff, have a hot car note. You know, you got a Scat Pack 392, you know, you got a motorcycle, you got an ATV, and we look at the shape of your home, you're in the grocery store telling your wife to put that deodorant back because it's too expensive. I don't want to find myself in that position as a man, and a good way not to find yourself in that position is to make sacrifices early on in life, sacrifices to make sure that your family has what they need as far as basic necessities and provisions. And then later in life, once you have put in 20, 30, 40 years worth of work and this stuff is paying dividends, your children will be out the house and you can, you know, and I tell you, man, by the time I'm older in life, man, I have set up the body of work to where, man, if I want to, you know, go get an ATV, spend $5,000-6,000 on an ATV in my 50s just to ride around the homestead, once my children out the house, I'll be able to do it because I put in that body of work. But every man's body of work is not the same. I want you to understand, where you see that man that has a big lifted truck, you know, got all these toys early in life, man, his work ethic may be, man, he's away in the oil fields for 3 weeks at a time to make this high level of income, to be able to live the life that he's living. Every man ain't gonna be able to do that. You got men that work in the oil fields that save their money, man, and at 23, 24 years old can go drop $50,000, $60,000 cash on a truck. Where the average man, you don't have a doggone car payment if you're not riding around in a used vehicle. Every man's body of work looks differently. But as a young man, new in marriage, I want to give you some advice that's gonna help you out so you can go the distance. It takes time to produce a whole lot of fruit. And as a young man, a lot of men think that the tree that they're working on growing and establishing is supposed to bear a whole lot of fruit out the gate, and that's just not the way it works. Fruit trees in development don't even work like that. It takes time. That big old Granny Smith apple tree that's got 300, 400 apples on it, so many that they're falling off on the ground, those apples that fall off and just rot because it's just too much apples for people to eat, that is the tenure and maturation of your life financially as a man. If you have a good body of work and your children are out the house and you can, you know, splurge and hey, wife, man, I'm about to take this fishing trip. I'm about to go, you know, take this DC fishing trip. Me and my brother, Commandment, we about to go do this. But don't think you're gonna be doing that and you got stuff in the home that needs to be replaced, tires on the car need a trim, all kinds of stuff. Be content with living simple and living below your means as a newly married man. Most of y'all ministries taking a gun barrel straight.